Davao City Mayor Rodrigo Duterte is set to win the Philippines presidential election in a landslide victory. Here to discuss his impending presidency and some of his plans are Philippines correspondent Raul Dancel and assistant foreign editor Trixia Carungcong. Welcome Raul and Trixia. Firstly, outgoing President Benigno Aquino has warned of a possible return to dictatorship under Duterte. Is this warning to be taken seriously?
Mr. Duterte has made very incendiary remarks during the campaign. He has said, for instance, that he will dissolve Congress if it gets in his way, that he will send over 100,000 criminals to the bottom of Manila Bay. Those remarks tend to portray him as an autocrat, even as a dictator. But I think what he needs to do now, and which I think he is in the process of doing, is to reach out to his rivals, to groups that have expressed concern over his respect for the rule of law and for human rights. I think we've heard President Benigno Aquino say that he will lay down his own life to protect the legacies of his parents, democracy icons Cory and Ninoy Aquino. I think it will serve Mr. Duterte well if he reaches out to Mr. Aquino and to those who support Mr. Aquino, which I think are still substantial, as we can see from the votes garnered by Vice Presidential candidate Leni Robredo, who is Mr. Aquino's bet. Mr. Duterte needs to dial down on the bravado, on the incendiary rhetorics, if he is to unite the Philippines. And I think he needs to unite the Philippines right now because he has promised, he has many lofty promises to keep. And he cannot keep those promises if his presidency will start off with a divided nation. And so he needs to dial back on the rhetoric, unite the nation, and assure everyone that he is not in fact, that he may be a tough-talking mayor, he is not in fact a dictator.
Trixia?
Duterte has mentioned the possibility of dissolving Congress if it gets in his way. So it's understandable that his rhetoric has raised some alarm. But some observers have also said that it was just part of his campaign tactic. So all we can do now is actually wait and see what he does when he takes office.
Mr. Duterte has declared that he plans to change the constitution from a presidential to a parliamentary system of government. How would this impact governance in the Philippines?
Now, there are pros and cons with this idea that has been proposed. Under a federal government, you will give more autonomy to these regions. So that means they will have more say, more control over their fate about the local issues. So in that sense, it might be good because they're saying that this centralized form of government, where decisions are handed down from Manila, tends to lead to neglect of areas that are far from the capital. So this is their main concern. And they feel that there is less understanding from Manila about the issues that are unique to their regions. On the other hand, the problem perhaps with federalism that some people have cited is the possibility that some of the strong families, the political clans that already control some of these areas, it might give them more power to push their own agenda in these areas.
Mr. Duterte said in his campaign promise that he would fight crime and corruption, but he has not outlined how he will achieve this. He did say that criminals can be executed by law enforcement in self-defense. Raul, your take on this?
I would assume that his threat to send 100,000 criminals to the bottom of Manila Bay is just a bluster. We also have to take into consideration the way he managed to transform Davao City from being a lawless city into one of the nation's safest. It wasn't without, we've heard reports that there have been over 1,000 summary executions by so-called death squads in Davao, and that Mr. Duterte himself has publicly acknowledged that he took part in some of those executions, that he favors summary executions. I recently heard him say that he will not be a dictator, but he will be a dictator on criminals. So I guess he really intends to come down hard on crime. How he intends to do that, whether he will stay within the bounds of the law, we really can't say. I really can't say right now whether he intends to do that. Although I heard him say earlier that he intends to take a more direct control of the police force, and so I guess he would probably assume the mantle of anti-crime czar.
Mr. Duterte has not unveiled much about his foreign policy agenda. He did comment on the issue of the dispute over contested islands in the South China Sea and that he favoured bilateral talks with China. But yesterday he said he would opt for multilateral discussions. What is your reading on this, Raul?
As far as the South China Sea disputes are concerned, I think he's pursuing a very pragmatic approach, telling China that we are willing to ease back on our claims over the South China Sea if we can, and maybe we can sit down and talk about how you, China, can help us, the Philippines, with our economy. That's why you can hear him say things like maybe China can build us railways. Maybe we are open to exploring resources within our exclusive economic zones with China. So I think this one is a very pragmatic approach. One casualty, of course, is that the case the Philippines filed before an international court in The Hague. I think there's a likelihood that this will end up as a relic of the Aquino administration's foreign policy. I think Mr. Duterte, it's not far-fetched to assume that Mr. Duterte will set aside any action on any decision from the international tribunal if it means moving forward with relations with China. Now, as far as will the United States look positively on such a soft approach to China, I think the U.S. is also pragmatic enough to assume that the South China Sea dispute is not alone between China and the Philippines, that it's a more complex regional issue, and anything that could ease tension in these waters would also be to the United States' interest. And so I don't see any conflict, any argument coming from the U.S. towards Mr. Duterte's so far planned China policy.
Now, Congresswoman Leni Robredo appears to have a slim lead over Senator Ferdinand Marcos Jr. in the vice presidential race. Would her personality complement Duterte if she wins?
Robredo's background is she's a lawyer. She's been a lawyer for the poor. She has a more gentle personality, and some people are hoping that she would be the voice of restraint, the voice of logic in a Duterte presidency. Unfortunately, the power of the vice president is limited, but there is still hope among her supporters that if she is there, she will be able to bring restraint to Duterte.
Thank you so much, Raul and Trixia. Official results are expected to be announced next week with the new president sworn in next month. For more on the Philippines presidential election, follow us on straitstimes.com.